Okay, so I'm going to sit right behind the patient. I can use the mirror to look down the axis to evaluate the prep, but I'm going to look this way when I'm doing it, at least for the central groove. I'm going to start about right here, so I'm a little bit closer to the facial side. And I mentioned to lubricate the handpiece and then blow off the excess lubricant. I didn't quite get it all out, but anyway. So I'll start about right here, and I'm going to cut. I'm just going to follow the central groove. And when I get closer to the pit right here, I'm going to look this direction, so I know where I am relative to the marginal ridge. I'm going to lean the burr toward the marginal ridge and get the wall height about a little bit shorter than the burr. I'm going to get 1/3 of the distance past the pit into the marginal ridge. So there's the dovetail I want. So I'm looking down the axis, I can see that wall. It's the height I want, it's the position that I want, it's the shape I want. Now I'm going to cut from there right to the middle of the contact, right here. So then this is a strategy that we're using. I don't care where the contact is, I'm going to cut right to the middle of it. Okay, so now I know that I need to extend lingually more and then facially more. So let's go facially. So notice I'm looking so I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. I can get the burr very close to the adjacent tooth. I'm going to go a little farther facially. So I'm going to look to see if that's going to give me some clearance. So that'll give me a little bit of clearance when I get rid of that last little bit of a hook there. So if I like the margin there, and again, notice all I care about is how close I am to the adjacent tooth. So I'm looking so I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. Then when I think I've got the margin where I want it, then I'm going to cut straight in from that margin. And right now it's obtuse, so I'm going to change it a little bit more. Since I'm doing an amalgam prep, I'm going to change it a little bit more. I'm still working at the same level of the pulpal floor. I have the same pulpal floor level all the way around there. Okay, so I'm getting closer to 90 degrees now. Wherever my margin is, I'm going to cut a 90-degree angle inward. I'll adjust it until I'm happy with the angle. Not quite there yet. When I'm happy with the angle, then I'll make a smooth curve to join this miss right here. So now I can see where the axial is going to have a corner about right here. Okay, so let's go lingually then. So I need to move the lingual margin way over here. So at the level of the pulpal floor, we're going to shift everything lingually. Now I know I'm going to have clearance on the lingual side. And again, I'm at the same pulpal floor level all the way to the lingual margin. Then I'm going to cut straight in from the lingual margin. And it's still obtuse, so I'm going to change it until it's closer to 90. Now it's pretty close to 90 right there. Now I'll just make a smooth connection through here. In this case, that's a pretty much ideal textbook looking class 2. It doesn't have to look that way. I'm going to go a little farther facially. I just don't think I'm going to quite have the clearance I want facially. So I'm going to move the margin a little bit more. Then I'm going to recut that angle inward. Then I'm going to recut the curve. Now I think I'll have a little bit more clearance. Now I'm going to shift over to the 55 burr. Now let's go gingerly. Okay, let me clean up my mirror a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to put the burr against the fascia wall. I'm going to make sure it's vertical. Notice I can look in other directions to make sure it's not leaning facially or lingually. So I can make sure it's vertical. And then when I'm going gingivally, I look this direction, parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle. Make a hole and cut away from that wall. Now this is a Kilgore typodont, so I don't have to go as deep gingivally as you all are going to have to when you're going gingivally on the accidental typodont. But I'm still going to do it exactly the same way, just 7 steps. You'll just have to do it more times on the accidental, and that's okay. So there are the corners, there's the axial wall. Now let's get rid of the excess along the facial wall. So again, I'm looking in the mirror so I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. So see how close my burr was to the adjacent tooth? Really close, huh? Same thing over here on the lingual side. I'm looking so I can see the space between the margin and the adjacent tooth. I can see the burr through that space so I can see how close I am. Now I'm going to get rid of the excess in the middle, that's step 7. Again, I'm looking parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle, gently smooth that margin, smooth the floor, all the way to the gingival margin. But again, I can spend all day long here and not worry about hitting the adjacent tooth because I can see exactly how close I am in every place. Now that's a reasonable gingival clearance right now, but I only had to go gingivally once. For the accidental, you'll have to go gingivally 2 or 3 times maybe. Okay, so let's use the hand instruments. On the upper right, the hoe, which has a blade which is perpendicular to the shaft, will fit against the facial lingual walls just fine. So I'm going to look down the wall, use the instrument perpendicular to the surface, come down the margin, and then sharpen the internal line angle. The other end of the instrument is going to come down the lingual wall, and again, I'm looking down the wall in the mirror, or else you can't see anything. So you've got to see the instrument is perpendicular to the surface from the occlusal all the way down to the gingival. Then we have the exit angle that we want. Now the enamel hatchet fits against the axial wall, and we can use it, if we lean the instrument away from the wall, we can use this instrument to create a retentive groove right here into the facial wall, so I can see it and I can feel it. Same thing over here, lean the instrument away from the lingual wall and then use the upper corner of the instrument to cut into the lingual wall and get that retentive groove only into the lingual wall, not into the axial wall at all. Or remember the bleeding retentive groove on the video or on the picture I showed you. Okay, so now we've got the retentive grooves, we've got nice exit angles, we've got clean margins. Now let's go ahead and angle the gingival floor. Not bevel, that's for amalgam or for composite. So this is the mesial, this is the distal gingival margin shimmer. We're doing a DO. I'm going to turn the patient to the right. And now I can bevel the axial pulpal line angle with this instrument. And then I'm going to angle the gingival floor. Angle, not bevel. Angle it all the way to the face wall, all the way to the lingual wall. It should clean up that margin really beautifully. Get a really clean margin, and there we go. All right, so that's what we're going to be working on. And again, a class 2 prep like this is basically a 3-minute prep, maybe even 2 minutes. Once you have the basic steps figured out and are looking in the right direction for each step, you do each step well before you do the next step, then it's going to come out pretty well. Okay? Okay, so looking along the marginal ridge, you can see the angle, the height, and the position. Look along the central groove so you can see where you are facial-lingually and see the angulation facial-lingually. That's why you ended up leaning facially. If you look from the lingual, you're always going to lean the burr away from your eye. because you can't see the angle. Look this way and then you can see the angle. Okay, so you're pretty close as far as the lingual margin is concerned. You want to trim away more of this excess here. Okay, so now move the facial margin out to about here and then cut 90 degrees in there, make a nice long cut, then make a curve. Then you can start thinking about going gingerly.
Okay.
All right, come it along. Okay. So it looks to me like you're letting the burr slip outside.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not getting the right grip, it's just slipping.
But that's why we always cut from the outside in. If you find your margin and cut from the outside in, it's less likely to slip around the corner. And then get a nice flat wall perpendicular surface. So there's your margin. So we have to move the margin way out, have to move the whole margin all the way out there. And then always cut from the outside in, then make the smooth curve here. And then we can put the corner of the box about right here. And then cut away from that wall in this direction here. But again, we would need to get really flat walls, 90-degree angles, long enough walls so we can find where the corner of the box should relate to them. Okay, now when you look down the axis, you're always going to undercut the marginal ridge. So if you try to look down this way, this is predictable. Okay? Now if you look this way, you'll never cut like this. You'll always lean the burr toward the marginal ridge. But you lean the burr like this because you were looking this way and you couldn't see what you were doing.
Yes.
So make sure you look along the marginal ridge. Then you can see the angle and the position and everything and the height. So you're really deep pulpally, and you had the burr leaning toward the distal the whole time. And that made lots of trouble. So anyway, the marginal ridge is all undermined now, but we'll live with it for now. Then over here, you know, whenever you find the margin at the level of the pulpal floor, then cut straight in from the margin. So you cut straight in, and then you check your angle in the mirror, and you change the angle, and you check in the mirror, and you keep adjusting it until you get a 90-degree angle. And then you can find the corner of the box here and cut away from the wall this way. Just like over here, find this corner and cut away from the wall this way. Then you can get the right shape. See, this is where your pulpal floor should have been, but you got way down there, didn't you? Again, that was all because you were looking the wrong way and ended up with the burr leaning totally toward the distal at the same time. So if you try to look down the axis like this, that's going to be a disaster every time. So we just don't do it that way anymore. Alright, so use your 55 burr. You can go gingerly. Use these corners. Cut down one wall, cut away from that wall, down this wall, cut away from this wall. See if you can get the shape of the axial wall and keep that shape all the way down to the gingival floor. Okay? Okay. Keep working on it. Yep. Alright, let's take a look. Okay, so let's see. At the marginal ridge, you're not too far off. You are leaning the burr a little bit away from the marginal ridge instead of toward it. And let's see. Okay. Okay, let's go with this. So there's a little bit of difference between these, but they're pretty close. I was struck first, it just seemed like it was a little bit bigger. So the shape of all 55 or 330 burrs are not the same. Anyway, so I'm leaning the burr toward the marginal ridge. I know I am because I'm looking in this direction. I can see the height of the burr, of the wall compared to the burr. And I can see the position of the wall in relationship to the pit and the top of the marginal ridge. Okay, so you got a little bit deeper over here, but in this area your pulpal floor position is pretty good. Now we need to get closer to the middle of the contact here. So follow the central groove. You can keep it a little bit more narrow than that, but you're not too far off. But now let's get right over next to the adjacent tooth, right in the middle of the contact. Get as close as you can to the adjacent tooth. Okay, so your facial margin's not too bad. You got a little bit overextended. It's close to 90, but it's a little bit acute. So if I wanted to change it, I move the margin a little bit and then recut inward. Don't forget, you're always cutting from the margin in. And then get the length, and then make the curve, then find the corner, and then get rid of the excess along this wall. So you want to get a nice flat wall. That's the way you can approach it. Do the occlusal part of the wall first. Make sure you're happy with that. Then match the dental part to the occlusal part. We'll do that as you go farther gingerly as well. But now it's a little bit easier to see where the corner of the box should be. And the direction that the wall should go away from that wall for the axial wall. Now over here you don't really have a clean margin. You don't certainly have a clean wall. So I won't be able to do anything over here until we get a little closer to the adjacent tooth and find that margin. And then from that margin cut straight in. Always from the outside in. Adjust the angle until you get the angle you want. Once you get the margin and the angle, then make the curve. Then you can find the corner of the box about right here and cut this way when you're working on the box. You got some slipping around up here on the occlusal, but mostly it's not too far off. So get the corner here, see if you can make that axial wall shape, and go gingerly following those 7 steps until you get some gingival clearance. You'll have to go down pretty far, huh? Right? So keep going. Okay. Alright, so you're undercutting, oops, let's get this light out of the way here. You're undercutting a lot. We talked about that during the lecture, right? See the undercut you're doing here?
Yeah.
Between the facial and lingual, you have about a 90-degree undercut instead of a 0.9 degree.
Okay.
Alright. Keep the burr vertical in the box. Okay, but we'll get back to that in a minute. Now, when you're doing the dovetail here, again, the dovetail goes facially, not lingually.
Okay.
And we know why.
This particular pinpoint, the butt slip.
Okay, but you also, you got several areas where you went lingual here. Again, look this direction, so you're looking parallel to the marginal ridge. Then, make sure you know that you're leaning the burr toward the marginal ridge, and just go out facially a little bit. So it's going to look like a foot. The toe comes out here, the heel stays over here. A little bit wide in the isthmus, and then again, you're not keeping the burr vertical much. When you undercut this much on the facial, look how easy it is to get way overextended at the bottom of that wall. So let me see if I can make it more vertical again. I really want you to have the experience of keeping the burr more vertical. It makes life a lot easier.
That's my biggest struggle now.
Yeah, well, just make sure you look to see if you're doing it, if you are keeping the burr vertical. And then drill a hole, cut away from this side, drill a hole over here, cut away from this side. So you got the basic shape of the axial starting out all right.
Okay.
So you use a 55 burr, see if you can go gingerly 7 steps at a time until you get the gingival clearance.
Okay.
Okay? All right, you're getting it. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, so you're just getting a little start on things here. Okay, so there's the 330 burr. So we're going to start by making the isthmus through here. Just look the way I am right now. So you see where you are relative to the central groove. Then when you get close to the marginal ridge, look this way. Okay, don't try to look down the axis. That's never going to work. See on the monitor? Yeah. So look this way, parallel to the marginal ridge, so you know where you are, you know how tall the wall is, and you know you're going faithfully. Making the dovetail in the right place and in the right direction. So that would have been the dovetail, about something like this. Okay, so once we have the height of the wall here in the right position, then we've got the pulpal floor position that we want. Then bring it back and cut straight to the middle of the contact. So this is what it looks like to cut to the middle of the contact. See how close I am to the adjacent tooth? You're really close, right? Okay, by the way, get rid of a lot of these teeth here. Yeah, it's going to complicate our life a lot in the next couple days, so change the teeth. Okay, so anyway, now you're in the middle of the contact. Now we need to find the facial margin. And we can just move the margin out this way a little bit at a time at the level of the pulpal floor until we know we're going to have some clearance. Once we get the clearance, then we cut straight in and keep adjusting it until we have the angle that we want. It's obtuse right now. Once we have the margin and the angle, then we get the length. Then we make the curve. Then we know we can put the axial about right there when the time comes. Do the same thing on the lingual side. Nip out lingually, get the lingual margin about right here. Cut in 90 degrees about this way. Okay. Make a smooth curve to join the isthmus. Then you can find the corner of the box in lingual, and then you can go ginduli. All right, so keep working on that. All right. All right, let's take a look. You seem to be working a little bit closer. Oh, let's see. Might want you using our mirror.
The one from your set is correct.
Okay, that's why I have a fresh one, but I have one in my pocket too. Let's take a look at it. I replaced several of them so far today. Yeah, it's not as badly scratched as some, but I can certainly replace that. And then this one.
That's what the tie for.
That's what the tie is for, yeah.
How many ties are in your collection?
I don't know, 30?
No, I don't believe you.
I think it's more like 100, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, let's get this tightened up a little bit right on the rod. There we go. Okay, so let's be a little more careful about leaning this wall toward the marginal ridge. So look this way, so you know the burr is leaning like this. Mm-hmm. Okay? You had it leaning about like that. Mm-hmm. So that will undermine the marginal ridge, which is a big problem. So your position's okay, but your angle was the big problem. And then look along this direction to do the isthmus, so you can keep it a little bit more narrow. Cut right to the middle of the contact, so you're close there. Just out of curiosity, sometimes these burrs will go in a little farther. Nope, not this one. Alright, so you've got your margin a little bit overextended, but that's very obtuse right now, isn't it? So we can start at your margin and just cut straight in and keep adjusting that angle a little bit at a time. And when you're happy with the angle and the nice clean margin and the length, then make the smooth curve here then you can use that corner for going gingerly, and the actual goes perpendicular to the facial wall. Now on the lingual, your clearance is pretty good. Keep the same pulpal floor position all the way to the lingual margin, though. Don't let the pulpal floor rise as it approaches the lingual side. Keep the same pulpal floor position everywhere. Now the fact that you overextended in the isthmus lingually makes this a little bit more complicated. But as soon as you find the margin, just cut straight in with the burr vertical and adjust that until it's 90 degrees. It's a little obtuse right now. Get a little closer to 90. Then you're going to put the corner of the box about right here and go this way with the axial. Over here, go this way with the axial. Then you'll be okay. Now we probably should have kept everything a little deeper pulpally all the way in here. Flatten that floor a little bit, but anyway, put the corner of the box about right here. Cut away from the wall this way. Come down this corner, cut away from the wall this way. Use the 55 burr and go gingerly a few times until you get some gingival clearance. Okay?
Sounds good. Could you
Right.
check my Kilgore prep?
No, I didn't. Hold on a second.
Yeah, because I did. Should I undo it first?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I can take that off. Yeah, the Kilgore is pretty much the same thing, other than the fact that when you do go gingerly, we don't need that right now. When you do go gingerly, we won't have to go as far on the Kilgore. Oh, there he is. Yeah, thank you. But so you don't have the clearance, and you're very obtuse. And you're still undercutting the marginal ridge. That's your number one failure right there.
Okay.
So again, look along the marginal ridge so you can see the angle. But you're too close to the marginal ridge right now. Even if I change the angle, the marginal ridge is undermined because of the closeness. So it should have been about right here, leaning this way. Okay, so when you find the facial margin wherever you want it, cut straight in. And keep adjusting the angle until you get the clearance and the angle and the length. So margin, angle, length, curve. Then you can go gingerly. But on this type of knot, you're going to have to be very careful to go gingerly just a little bit. On the other type of knot, you're going to have to go gingerly really far. Be careful about your vertical angle.
Oh yeah.
Keep it more vertical over here. So check this way to make sure it's vertical, then look this way when you're cutting from the margin inward.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love that skill. I'm gonna build that skill again.
Yeah, I bet. Okay, so when you do the 55 burr, you really get nicely defined corners and keep the burr vertical the whole time. It'll make it a lot safer for you. Okay, cool. Keep working on it. Okay, so you let the burr slip out a couple more times, huh? So make sure that you always cut from the outside in. But you kept the corner pretty well done. You kept the corner in about the right place. Your axial shape is pretty good. But be careful, if you're not careful right here, the burr wants to go out.
Yes.
So when we cut from the when we work on these walls, we always tend to cut from the outside in, or from the top to the bottom. Okay, so you have a little bit of gingival clearance. Why don't you go gingerly a little more, but use those corners the way you did, and you'll be fine. And yeah, when you have this much clearance, it's especially difficult to keep the burr from slipping outward. If you were to have kept the facial margin here, then the burr doesn't have any room to slip through. So that's why it's a little bit more helpful to keep the clearances under control. But again, practice recutting this margin. And then recutting the corner. And if you practice that a lot, then you won't let the burr's not going to slip around anymore. Okay, cool. Keep on going, and then finish it with the hand instruments. Okay. Okay, now you're leaning the burr toward the adjacent tooth again. Okay, so I'm looking down the axis and I can't see the axial wall, and so that means you're leaning your burr distally. People lean the burr distally when they're trying to look vertically downward when they're doing the prep. So you'll hear me say it many times that you can't look down the axis and do a class 2. Can't be done. So that's why we look this way. So then you can see where you are facially. You can see how close you are to the adjacent tooth. You can see where you are axially. So I know my axial wall position is much better. Because I'm looking so I can see the axial wall position, and I can see how close I am to the adjacent tooth. I can always see how close I am to the adjacent tooth, and I can see how deep I am axially. So there's a completely different axial wall shape. And if I can get rid of this excess over here, and the excess over here, and the excess in between, then I'll have a flat gingival floor all the way to the margin, and then I'll see if I have any gingival clearance. Then I'll be in good shape. Okay? Okay, so see if you can get rid of the excess over here, but be careful. You know, don't let the burr slip outward. Just gently trim that away. Gently trim it away over here, but you don't have to worry about it as much over here. But look so you can see how close you are to the adjacent tooth at all times. I see exactly where I am because I'm looking through that little space. Okay? But if you look down the axis, you're going to undercut the axial wall, you're going to overextend axially, and you're going to kill the adjacent tooth, which is what you did right here. Okay? Alright, so let's keep going gingially, but again, look this way now. Alright? Oh, can I have my mirror? Thank you. Okay, when you want to use the light, put it right over your head. Don't shine it in this way. Okay, so even though you've been going gingivally a lot, you still don't have enough gingival clearance, right? Yeah. And see where your axial wall is? That's right in the middle of the pulp chamber, isn't it?
Yes, it's extended.
Okay. So that's a bit of a problem.
It would have been an RCT case.
Yeah, so we look this way so you know where you are. Okay, if I look this direction, I can see where the burr is axially. I can see how close I am to the adjacent tooth, and I can see how deep I am axially. Isn't that amazing? I can see everything I need to by looking this direction.
My problem is I'm not able to see.
Well, what do you mean? You can see just as well as I can, right?
Yeah.
No, you can't see the lingual wall, but you know, if you got the occlusal part of the lingual wall done well, then you just use it to guide you. But what do I want to see? I need to see how close I am to the adjacent tooth. I need to see how deep I am axially. Those are the only two things you must absolutely see. If you try to look down the axis, then you can't see either one.
You're holding it like this?
Well, let's take a look. If you try to look down the axis, you can't see either one. You're going to hit the adjacent tooth, and you're going to undercut axially and overextend axially. So we don't look down the axis. We look parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle, like you're seeing over there. Okay? Now I see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. I see exactly how deep I am axially. I got a whole new axial wall. Okay? Now use the end of the burr, get rid of the excess along the face wall, the excess along the lingual, the excess in between. You get some more gingival clearance, then finish it with the hand instruments. Okay? Cool. Oh yeah, thank you. Okay. So you're chewing on the adjacent tooth a bit over here now, huh? Okay, so let's clean up this lingual wall a little bit. The facial is not too far off, but lingually, let's make sure that the occlusal outline is just beautiful before you try to go gingerly any place. Okay, so now when you're going gingerly, let's put a corner about right here. Cut away from each wall. So that's the way we can start when we're going gingerly. So make a hole at one wall, cut away from that wall. Make a hole at this wall, cut away from this wall. So now we have the position and the shape of the axial. We have square corners internally. Now get rid of the excess along the facial, excess along the lingual, excess in between. And then at that point you probably won't have enough gingival clearance. You're going to repeat that process again, going gingerly 7 steps at a time. Use these corners. And that should make it pretty straightforward for you to get the gingival clearance. Just repeating those steps as many times as you need to. Okay? Cool.
There's diversions again. The proximal.
Ah, okay. Okay, so this guy, I think we worked on this before, did we?
Yeah,
okay,
I did not touch it.
Yeah, so we got it a little bit divergent there. You're making a lot of undercut facial lingually. See this?
Yeah, and this is why there's a chip of a lingual.
Yeah, that'll be easy to happen. So just try to keep the burr vertical as much as you can in the box. It's going to be much safer. And so, yeah, I got a little... I'm going to change that facial margin a little bit, move the margin out facially a little more. Then find the corner again. Keep the burr vertical all the time.
Why did you extend it?
Because the margin was damaged a little bit right there. And the wall wasn't quite flat. Now it's much flatter. When you have a flatter wall, it allows us to define the internal line angle better. Then if we needed to go deeper gingerly, we could use that corner. Now this is a Kilgore, so we don't have to go deeper gingerly. But, so this is the vertical angle that you use instead of being vertical. So check first with the mirror, make sure that the burr is not leaning facially or lingually. Then look this way when you're doing the prep. And you can keep the wall a lot more vertical. I'm just going to make it more vertical just to illustrate how it's done. And then keep it vertical. When you have the burr more vertical, it's much easier to do the rest of the prep cleanly.
Yeah.
And get nice corners and nice shape internally. Okay, here a little. Okay, so let's see if you can use the hand instruments to finish this up. Again, the better you define the internal line angles of the burr, the easier it is to use the hand instruments. And again, when you lean the burr this way, the other thing that happens is your gingival floor rose.
Yes.
And so that's obviously going to happen. The gingival floor is going to be perpendicular to the burr. So if you lean the burr this way, then the gingival floor gets shallower in this area. And that might not be a big issue, but it could make it more complicated to finish the prep well. Okay, so I'll finish it with the hand instruments. And you've got this other guy over here.
I did not touch it.
Okay. Yeah, so go ahead and go gingerly on this one, finish the other one with the hand instruments, and we'll be ready to start another prep pretty soon. Okay, cool. Okay, let's take a look. Yeah, too deep pulpally, and we don't know yet about the gingival clearance because you have a lot of excess.
Okay. So go deeper.
We don't know. We don't know because you have a lot of excess. Well, it's not actually too much excess, but there's a little bit, but yeah, well, yeah, let me get rid of the excess along the facial lingual walls, then we'll see better. Again, keep the burr more vertical. Get rid of the excess. Okay, get rid of the excess along the facial wall. Okay, so we're going to keep the burr a little more vertical, get rid of the excess along the facial wall. all the way to the margin. Get rid of the excess along the margin gingivally. Get rid of the excess along the lingual wall all the way to the margin. Notice what I see at every point. I can see exactly what's happening. I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. Because I'm looking in the right direction. Okay. Still not quite flat there. I want to clean up that margin a little bit more. We can always go back a few steps and do the earlier steps and complete them a little bit better. And that always makes it easier to go ahead. Okay, so then when we go gingerly, use this corner right here. And use this corner about right here. So use those corners and cut these directions, and then you'll get an axial that's in a better position. And get rid of the excess along that gingival margin, you'll have some clearance. But again, notice before when you were looking down the axis, you killed the adjacent tooth. So that's why we never look down the axis.
I've touched the adjacent?
No, I wouldn't say touched.
Okay.
You know, this is, you know, we have various levels of touching. There's Band-Aid. There's call the ambulance. There's urgent care. There's the ER. And there's DOA. Okay? So you're kind of, you know, you're pretty much tending to get DOA.
Oh,
Okay? So again, but look this way. And then you'll never hit the adjacent tooth. If you look this way, you'll always hit it. Because you can't see the burr unless you hit the adjacent tooth. So look parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle, just like this. Then you can see everything you need to when you're working near the adjacent tooth.
Okay.
Okay? All right, so smooth out that gingival floor a little bit. Get rid of the excess at the margin. You'll have some clearance. Then see if you can finish it with the hand instruments.
Okay.
All right? Oops. Thank you. All right. So you still don't have quite enough gingival clearance. Right, your gingival clearance is maybe 0.225. So again, back to the corner. Back to the corner. So down the corners, cut away from the walls. Now get rid of the excess along the facial, along the lingual, and along the gingival. And then you'll probably have some clearance. That's what we want to do, is practice going gingival over and over and over. Okay? Cool. Get it. Okay, so damage to the adjacent tooth is a big thing, isn't it? So if you look this direction, you can see the damage.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is without a doubt DOA, right? They're never going to make it to the ER. Okay, but that's, look at the big hole there.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see that if you're looking this direction when you're doing the pen. Okay, you won't see that you're hitting the adjacent tooth like that if you're looking this way. If you're looking the way I am, you'll see it. Okay, so the whole point was to look the way I am. Parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle. Then I can go gingerly as many times as I want. I can get rid of the excess along that wall. I can get rid of the excess of the gingival margin. I don't have to worry about hitting the adjacent tooth, right? Do I look worried? I'm not worried because I can see how close I am to the adjacent tooth. When you did it, you had no idea how close you were to the adjacent tooth. So that's one of the things we really want to learn, is how to know that you're seeing the really important stuff. And one of the most important things to see is how close you are to the adjacent tooth. If you make a big hole like that at that angle, it just says, hey, I'm looking the wrong way, and that's going to be a big issue. Okay, so let's see if you can finish it up with hand instruments. Put some retentive grooves, try to clean some margins. We could maybe get a little bit closer to 90 degrees right here. Clean up that margin a little bit more. Practice doing some of those things. Use the hand instruments, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next prep. Okay? Okay, well, we'll figure out just how. Okay, so looking back at 5, so we have 5 and 12 that we've been working on. And so, okay, so you got plenty of gingival clearance down there. Again, when you go gingivally, so I gave you an axial wall about right here, and then you sort of cut past that. So again, just make sure you're not looking down the axis. Okay, so this, you're still hitting the adjacent tooth a lot, but not as much. So you see the angle here? It should have been more vertical. There's still a fair amount of excess at the gingival margin. So make sure you look this way. If you're not looking this way, you can't trim off the excess without hitting the adjacent tooth. Still a little bit there, but by the time you use the hand instrument, probably you'll have the gingival clearance that you need on this one. So use
facially there is less clearance, right?
I don't understand.
Gingival clearance is less in the facial.
Well, here's the middle.
Yeah.
That's where we look for the clearance. The facial part of the gingival is tons of clearance. Lingually, tons of clearance, right?
No, so you said you were
So we
removing
just
the excess right now facially.
no, I'm removing the excess on the entire gingival. Now the gingival margin is clear. Now we can see the clearance that we have in the middle.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, but again, make sure you're looking this way so you know where the axial wall is too. You've got to be looking parallel to the contact, downward at a 45-degree angle. Then you know where the axial wall is.
Okay.
That's the main thing to learn. Okay, and your exit angles are pretty good for a composite, so that's not too bad. But of course, you're in the pulp chamber. It's too deep axially. Axially.
Okay.
And then use your hand instrument to get rid of the hook of unsupported enamel in that facial margin right there.
Okay.
And you can do a little bit with the hand instrument on the lingual and toward the gingival as well.
Okay, so I have to use an enamel hatchet, right, for that?
Well, enamel hatchet and a hoe, those are the two instruments that we always have to use both.
Yeah.
Now, in this case, since it's composite, if we're only going to work on the margins, we would use the enamel hatchet, correct, for both the facial lingual walls. Now, making the gingival bevel. When you have a flat facial wall, put the burr against the wall right here and cut gingerly, looking down the wall, cut gingerly at the wall, and then, so you're cutting gingerly right at the wall into the gingival margin, and then you get a bevel there, and then you just bring the bevel away from the lingual wall to the middle where it joins the bevel that came from the facial wall.
Okay.
So go over that again right now, just like I did, and you'll be off to a good start. Okay? All right. Okay, so we didn't use the hand instruments so much on the amalgam prep over here. So you could still have refined the internal line angle here better with the hand instrument. Same thing over here. See how well that's defined there? Now the hand instrument will really clean it up. Really make a nice square corner, get a nice exit angle. Angle the gingival floor. See, you still have some excess over here. I can feel it, I can see it. If I break it off, it might chip like that and damage the gingival margin. So we'd want to use the burr with the burr turning to actually smooth it out. Okay, lots and lots of damage on the adjacent tooth. See that?
Yeah.
So that's because you're still trying to look down the axis. As long as you do, you'll always hit the adjacent tooth. So nice clearance, nice exit angle. Your exit angle here is kind of acute. So we could find a new margin and a new angle. But whenever you're working in the box, look the way I am. So I know where I am axially, and I know how close I am to the adjacent tooth. I can get rid of all the excess at the gingival margin. But I can see exactly where I am relative to the adjacent tooth because I'm looking in the right direction. I know I'm not doing this because I'm looking that direction. That's the difference. That makes all the difference in the world. Okay, now when we do the gingival bevel, I'll take the ET3F. As long as we have a nice flat wall to put the burr against, we can come down this way. Right down that facial margin into the gingival margin, and then away from the lingual wall or buccal wall, come down the lingual margin into the gingival, and then away from the lingual wall toward the middle. Now we have a nice gingival bevel. Okay? But again, notice how I'm using the mirror to see exactly what I need to see. We need to start using that technique when we're working near the adjacent tooth.
Yeah, I'm finding it like it's really difficult to, adjust the mirror and the handpiece at the same time.
Yeah, well, they work as a pair. So practice, go over the gingival bevel several times, make it bigger. Just feel what it's like, and you'll get the coordination between the two down better. Okay? Cool. Then you can take a lunch break.
I'm struggling with finding the correct angulation.
The exit angle?
Not the exit angle, but for preparing the
The vertical angulation?
This teeth.
Yeah, we'll look at that in a minute.
Sure.
So we talked before about making sure you have the right vertical angulation by making sure that you don't look down the axis, but you look parallel to the contact downward at a 45-degree angle. So we talked before about how to get the internal line angles correct. And I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth. I can see exactly where I am gingivally. Okay, so over here, yeah, so you haven't found the facial margin. So don't try to go gingivally if you don't have the outline form. Okay? So you don't have a margin. It should be way out here, shouldn't it? Lingual margin's okay. It's overextended, but at least it'll work. So let's look this way and put the margin where it should be. This is what we do with the 330 burr before we ever think about going gingivally. Now there's the facial margin. Then cut whatever exit angle you want. In this case, it'll be obtuse. Now your exit angle and your clearance over in lingual were pretty good. So there's an obtuse angle, that's okay. So you found a nice corner about right here. Get rid of the excess. I would have put the corner on the facial about there. Not quite as deep as you were, but now get rid of the excess. Now you get rid of the excess in the middle. But again, I'm looking so I can see how close I am to the adjacent tooth. I have no problem. Now, no gingival clearance, right? So do it again. Put the burr here. Drill hole, cut away from this side. Drill hole about here and cut away from this side. So not as deep axially as you were here. But now get rid of the excess. Along the facial, along the lingual, along the gingival. Look this way when you're doing it. So you know you're not going to hit the adjacent tooth like this. Okay? And you're aware of the fact that you totally killed the marginal ridge, right? You should have stopped here. So again, when you're near the marginal ridge, look this way so you know where you are and you know the angle that you have the burr. Okay? Alright, so just do a little bit more. Just get rid of the excess gingivally. You'll still probably have to go gingivally another time or two to get the gingival clearance. Okay? Alright.
I just broke my 55. Handpiece fell down.
Okay. Well, then you have extra ones in the kit.
Oh, okay.
There's a whole bunch more 55s in there. Okay, so right now I'm just going to use the 330 burr. Well, let's get a 55. I'll get it. Yeah. Okay, so lots of damage on the adjacent tooth.
Yes.
Okay, so why aren't you looking the way I am right now? If you look the way I am right now, you won't damage the adjacent tooth because you can see that you're doing it. See the difference between this and this?
I want to see the butt of it straight. I want to see that.
Well, vertical you mean? The burr is not bent.
Okay.
You want to make sure the burr is vertical. But you've got to be looking this way so you see if you're hitting the adjacent tooth.
Sorry, Dr. Duggan. Did someone order Domino's? There's a delivery guy.
Oh, maybe anybody ordered Domino's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay. He's
Yeah.
out front.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, still undercutting a lot. But we said you're going to try to keep the burr a little more vertical when you went gingerly a little bit more. And it looks like you probably did, but still tending to undercut. So just look this way to make sure the burr is vertical, and then when you make sure it's vertical by looking this way, then look this way when you're doing the prep.
Okay.
You won't have so much in the way of undercuts. But you notice that when I'm in the box, I'm looking this way, but before I do anything, I check this way.
Okay.
With the mirror, it's really easy to check in different directions, isn't it? But if I'm looking this way when I'm working in the box, I'm never going to hit the adjacent tooth like that. So that's what everybody needs to be paying really careful attention to. Okay, so I can get a nice gingival margin. I got some clearance. Let's put a bevel on. So I use the ET3F burr. So as long as we have flat walls, we can put the burr right against the wall here, cut gingerly right at the wall, cut into that margin, and that creates a bevel that connects smoothly to the facial wall. So come down the facial wall, into the gingival margin, then away from the facial wall, toward the middle, and then down the lingual wall. Normally we'd have it a lot flatter than this. I'll try to correct it a little bit with this burr. Down the wall, into the gingival margin, then away from the wall, toward the middle. And since you damaged the gingival floor right there, we might make an extra big bevel right there to make that damaged area sort of get removed by the bevel. Anyway, go over the bevel and feel what it's like to make that bevel gingerly, and then we'll move on from there. Okay?
Sorry, you want me to
Go over the bevel right now.
Uh-huh.
Do just what I did, but make the bevel a little bit bigger so you have a feeling what it's like to do it right. Okay?
just one more request.
Mhm.
Can you just evaluate my adjacent tooth of 5 to have done any damage on the other side?
Yeah, and I did earlier, and I just looked at it a few minutes ago too, so let me double check, make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, so we talked about the axial wall position and so forth, and talked about the damage to the adjacent. What is it you want to know about 5?
You didn't mention any adjacent tooth damage when you checked it.
Oh, well, I'll put the burr against the adjacent tooth damage. So you damaged it like this. Look at the monitor. This is the direction you have to look when you do it, but this is the way you had it leaning. Instead of having it vertical like this, you leaned it like this. Okay?
Okay.
So yeah, look at it carefully. You'll see it. Okay. Okay, so on this one over here, we looked at 5 before, but you still don't have the gingival clearance quite. So how do you get gingival clearance? And by the way, you have a 245 burr. Yeah, we're not going to start with that. Let's get things under control with the 55 burr first. And if you want to use the 245 burr later, you could, but let's learn how to do it the easy way first. So drill a hole, cut away from that wall, drill a hole over here, cut away from this wall, get rid of the excess along these walls, especially along the gingival. If you don't get rid of the excess along the gingival, you don't know how much clearance you have. Notice I can see exactly how close I am to the adjacent tooth, right? That's how we control the axial wall position. And at the same time, we know we're not hitting the adjacent tooth. So we can adjust things however we want to. Okay, but look how much you're leaning the burr into the adjacent tooth. The way I'm looking, you can't hit the adjacent tooth because you know that you are. Okay, so over here, still hitting the adjacent tooth quite a bit, but more importantly, you're going really deep axially. Now, the problem is that if you are not looking the way I am, you're always going to hit the adjacent tooth, and you're always going to go too deep axially. Looking the way I am, we can control the axial position, we can control how close we are to the adjacent tooth. Anybody that tries to look down the axis when they're doing it is always going to hit the adjacent tooth. So you took a big chunk out of the adjacent tooth, right? Okay, but check to make sure the burr is vertical, looking this way first, then look this way when you're doing it, and you can't go wrong, really. It's always going to come out pretty well. By the way, use a new burr for every prep.
Yeah.
Okay, so now if we get flat walls and the exit angles that we want all the way down to the gingival floor, then we can make that gingival bevel. Okay, so we put the burr against the facial wall, cut gingerly right there.
Okay.
But notice how important it is to use the mirror. So I know I've got the burr along the wall. I know I'm cutting gingerly from the wall toward the middle. Same thing over here, down this wall, into the gingival margin, and then away from that wall toward the middle. So what I want you to do is do this exact same thing that I'm doing right now. Just do it yourself right now. And then make that bevel a little bit bigger and see what it feels like. But helping to use the mirror, which is totally necessary here, it'll help you use the mirror when you're doing other parts of the prep too. Then it'll work out better. Okay. Okay. Boy, it almost looks like you didn't have contact to begin with. It must have been a really tiny contact. Okay, because the box is so small and yet you have clearance, so that's always a good thing. All right, so let's see. Yeah, your gingival bevel is probably a little too vertical. Try to lean the burr more toward the axis when you're making the bevel.
Okay.
It'll be easier to see that way, and you won't get as much clearance gingerly. You didn't need that much.
Do we need 45-degree bevel?
Yeah, something like that. But you know, you're limited by the axial wall. Okay, so let's see. You don't have a 55 burr in the burr block at this point, so well, it broke. Okay, you've got a bunch more in your kit.
That's a Fisher burr?
Yeah, the straight Fisher burr.
It's this one? No.
Okay, you would have a bunch more in your kit though.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll give you an extra pack of each. So your clearances are a little much, but your exit angles are pretty close. But let's come in a little bit farther. Whatever exit angle you have, cut in a little bit farther before making any curve to join the isthmus. That'll help you choose where you want the axial, because your axial is pretty underextended, especially on the lingual side. Also, you notice the marginal ridge wall right here is, you know, it's just a millimeter. It's not a millimeter and a half yet. So look this way when you're working on that marginal ridge, and so that you can see how tall the wall is while you're doing it. Use a new burr for every prep, by the way. So make sure it's just a millimeter and a half tall, so it's deeper now than it was. Then come back through the central groove at that level, all the way to the middle of the contact with the adjacent tooth. Then find your margins and your angles, and everything stays at the same level once you define the level right near the marginal ridge. Okay, now I would have gone deeper axially on the lingual side. Again, the 55 burr makes it a lot more controllable there. But on the facial side, you're not too far off. So now it's a little bit more uniform looking as far as the actual position. But again, define the corners really well on both the facial and lingual. That's how you get the shape looking just right. Okay. So yeah, and if you had leaned the burr a little bit more inward toward the axis when you made the gingival bevel, it probably would have ended up looking a little better. But let's just modify that a little bit.
For bevel?
Yeah, for the gingival bevel. It's easier to see the bevel, easy to see that you've done the bevel, and you won't get any more clearance than you want if you lean the burr as much as you can toward the axis of the tooth. So now the bevel's easier to see because it's not so vertical. So you have the burr like this, I'm going to lean the burr like that. Down the wall, away from the wall toward the middle. Down the wall, away from the wall toward the middle.
Yeah, I don't see the tip of the burr that way if it's damaging the adjacent tooth.
No, it won't.
Okay.
It won't. First of all, I mean, it's nowhere near the adjacent tooth.
Okay. So I
Right.
need to check that from with a mirror.
Yeah, so you're going to do it like this, and you know exactly where you are.
Okay.
All right, don't forget to bevel the axial pulpal line angle even for a composite.
With the same burr or hatchet?
Either one. Gingival margin trimmer, you can use the end of a 55 burr. This burr is a little bit harder to use, so we don't tend to use it with this, but you could. Okay, they're pretty good. Okay. A little big as far as this area is concerned, but mostly not too bad. Cool.
Big in each direction.
Okay, so what do you think about this one?
The axial clearance should be
I'm not sure what axial clearance is.
axial depth
Oh, okay.
should be bigger towards the buccal.
Yeah, you could make it a little more symmetrical that way.
The exit angle, the clearance, the buccal clearance is too big.
Yeah,
At the
it's
exit angle.
definitely more than a millimeter.
Yeah.
Also over here, more than a millimeter.
Yeah.
Your facial is not particularly flat, is it? Wouldn't it be nice to, once you find the margin, cut straight in, make it really flat from the margin inward. And make sure you're really happy with the angle and the length before you make any curvature to join the isthmus. Then it makes it easier to find the corner of the box. When you find the corner of the box better, it's more easy to make the axial more uniform and with the appropriate curvature. So again, it all comes back to the occlusal outline, getting that really done beautifully to begin with. Then it makes everything easier when you make the axial. But I like your axial shape over here pretty well. You didn't get very much clearance gingerly, huh?
Didn't I?
Well, it's just only 0.2 right now. You made a bevel, and you had it joining the facial, but now that I've changed your facial, you'll have to redo it again. But you didn't make the bevel from the lingual side. If you make the bevel from the lingual side and make it strong enough, it'll give you some gingival clearance. But right now, there's not very much there, so there'd still be some decay. So make a really significant bevel on that lingual side. Otherwise, the occlusal is pretty good. You're probably a little bit deep pulpally.
Yeah, 2 millimeters instead of 1.5.
Yeah, maybe not quite 2.
And
And make sure it's really obvious that you're leaning the burr toward the marginal edge. So when I look down here, I want to see that wall really clearly.
okay.
All right, so not too far off.
Thank you.
Getting it.